what you're trying to do is sort of tell a story. All right. So we're putting together this grant proposal is about being a good storyteller. How is it that you're going to tell this story? And one of the most important things in telling the story is making sure that you know and understand who your audience is. And it may be that you don't know who the reviewers are. You might have some idea, but you could be able to dig a little bit in order to learn a little bit more about who your audience is. So you want to make sure that you are writing to that audience. Robin, I'll let you.
Yeah, so let me take over from that. And so part of this is stuff that's all on that grant writing tip sheet too. And it's just to kind of list it out so it's easy to remember. And part of knowing your audience and reviewers is actually just like really, really doing your research to make sure that you fit that grant. Because it's not uncommon to get really excited about a grant and think it would be so great because what you're seeing is money for a program that you really, really care about and you're so excited about it. And I've done this and I've had people bring me grants like this too that say, it's like, look, 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 here's this grant, let's write it. And you look and you're like, I think that there's a few key pieces where you don't match. So just read the RFP really, really closely. Read it closely, go to the webinar that they offer if they do on the grant, read their FAQs, you know, go to the website, learn more about the funder. And this doesn't have to take super long. It just means you're doing your due diligence to make sure that you are really a good fit for this grant. Because you don't want to waste your time because it takes a lot of time. Sometimes you look at it and you're like, I think we're on the edge, but I'm going to try for it anyway because it would be so amazing if it worked and I really believe in this. Sometimes you just can't do it. One thing I find too is there's some great looking grants that they're only going to offer 2 or 3 nationwide, and those you just need to think really, really hard about before you do it. Unless you are absolutely so ready to write that grant, I wouldn't do it. It's just, especially when they're federal grant, ones that give out that few are often earmarked for certain, they have people in mind already. So definitely do your research and feel free to reach out to the people who are offering the grant. In the cases of a federal grant or something, they often are going to tell you, no, you have to go to our FAQs in our webinar or submit questions in a very formal way. But especially when you're working with a foundation or something, they often will be happy to answer your questions and help you make the right decision. So go ahead and do that.
And I would say also with regard to, you go back to this slide. Okay. With regard to meeting with reviewers and foundation folks is, yeah, knowing well what their expectations are, what their emphasis areas are, what they're interested in. It's almost like you're doing a pre-interview before you submit it. So you've got sort of insider knowledge on what they're looking for to know whether or not, again, like Robin mentions, whether or not you're going to line up well here.
Yeah, and there's resources to do that if you have any access to a university library, which I just happen to have, so I can help you. But you can also look up Foundation Directory online and look up their 990 forms, they're called, for the funders, because they tell you what they funded in the last few years and in what amounts. And that often gives you a really good idea of whether you're going the right direction or not. Because sometimes you'll find out, oh, wow, they've only really given to like summer camps in this certain area ever. It's like, we might be the one time that they decide to branch out, but we're going to need to build that relationship with them first. That's not probably just going to happen by us submitting a grant. So okay, I see the question of 990 forms. Those are forms. They're an IRS form that foundations have to file, I think, to keep their nonprofit status. And it's about, not all foundations have to do it, so they must be set up in slightly different ways that I don't understand. But most foundations have to file this 990 form with the IRS, and it's public. It's open to the public, and so there's different places that collect them so that you can look them up to kind of learn more about foundations. And one of those is Foundation Directory Online, and they have a free 990 search piece of it. They keep changing how they set it up. I think it's actually through a company called Candid now, and so you can look up Candid online. But yeah, so that gives you some information, and that's kind of nice too, because you can actually sometimes figure out ways to look like in certain zip codes, you know, who in your area or who in the state of Montana is giving out grants. So if you're interested in learning more about that, contact me. I'll help you. And then the next thing you really got to do as you're getting ready to write the grant, there's a lot of getting ready pieces that are going to make your writing so much easier, is you build your team. And your team might be, you're working with the people you're collaborating on, you know, the collaborating organizations. Your team is also internal. It's like who there is going to help you put together the appendices, especially if you're doing a federal grant or some of the state grants. You have a lot of stuff you have to prove. You have to prove that you're financially capable of handling the grant, that people have the right licenses. You know, there's all kinds of stuff. And the appendixes are usually really listed out. But who's going to help you find that stuff? Also think about who is going to help you proofread when you're done. Because there's times that I've been like 90% of the grant team. I've done 90% of the work, but you still got to find somebody for that 10% that's going to proofread your grant, that's going to give you technical information on how the computer data systems are going to work for, you know, collecting it, or that's going to help you. For me, it's always like figure out all the details of the budget, like how you figure out the fringe and how you know, have I gotten the right numbers here? So that's your team.
I'd also say something about the team. That this proposal writing team is also your intervention team to some degree as well. So if Robin's writing the whole thing herself, which I know some of you are in situations they say, hey, would you write this grant? And you end up being the person writing it, then sometimes it's sort of assumed that you're going to be the person that's going to do it too. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, this requires a group effort. And the reviewers and the funders think that this is going to be a group effort, that there's going to be a team that's going to pull this together and make this happen rather than one person. That one person quits or something happens, and all of a sudden you lessen the likelihood that, you know, that's going to be successful going forward. And again, as an investor, I don't want to put money into something that is not going to be successful. So who's the group of people that are going to make sure that this is written but also then carried out? You also have to think about your team with regard to who are people who are just straight out get her done on time people and meet deadlines. So if there are people that you think, oh gosh, I don't know, they could block this, they don't like change, it's difficult for them to get along with so-and-so, it may be really thinking selectively about who would be a part of that team as well.
Yep. And also just like there was one time that I got desperately sick in the 4 days before a grant was due. And if you have nobody else that is helping you out with that, you are in trouble. So just having somebody who's aware of what's going on and can kind of step in and pick up the pieces is just a really good idea, especially if it's a bigger grant. And so then the next thing to do is kind of organize those tasks. Just be really clear about who's doing what kind of schedule you're looking at, get everybody on the same page. Make sure you've got your own checklists or calendar or Gantt chart or whatever it is you use to kind of organize your time so that you know what you're talking about. And sometimes a grant falls apart in this piece, honestly, because you just realize that you have nothing like near enough time to pull it together at this moment. But you've still done some good work to figure out who your team is, and you can use it going forward. And then finding your data, that's always a big piece. It's like, you know what you want to look for, you know what you have already, good list of what you've got, what you need, what you would like to find. And especially in rural areas, it's tricky to find data. At the center, we use a tool called Policy Map that can sometimes help us more get rural data than most other sources I've seen. So you can contact us if you're trying to see what you can find. But I would also say you can do a lot of combination of data. You could say, well, in the state of Montana, we know that this is true about obesity rates or whatever. We also know, or say we're doing something more like a hunger and nutrition thing. We know that this is true statewide. And then you can say locally, we know that our demand for the food bank is this, or that our free and reduced price lunch is this. And you can start to layer up different pieces and levels of information to create the story. You may not have that 2 or 3 big pieces of data that just shows, you know, boom, shows it right now, but you can definitely put together lots of data that really tells it well. So be a little bit creative about thinking what kind of data you have.
We also have on our webpage, and hopefully we have a chance to show you at some point here too, a data dashboard. So what we have is the entire state of Montana broken down into every single county so that you can go into your own county and then you can look at, we have like 110 variables. So it could be the number of kids under the age of 5 who are receiving WIC. the number of veterans that are located in your county, or percentage of veterans that are in your county. So before you have to start digging around, and we'll show you where our webpage is and where this data dashboard is, it's called the Montana Data Dashboard. It's at our webpage, that you could go into every single one of your counties and be able to get the vast majority of data that you'd be looking for, so that you're not having to search all around for it.
Yeah, and also that's linked on the close to last page, the second to last page, I think, of this PowerPoint as well, which you have gotten in the mail. So there will be an easy way to get it through that too. And then when you get to actually writing the grant, the way you write it actually does matter a lot, because you can make it kind of a very bureaucratic slog where it's hard to really retain information, or you can write something that's very direct and to the point, and really help, like it makes it very vivid. It can make your objective really vivid and your needs really vivid. The best way to do that is use active verbs in short sentences. Most people who write grants or different kinds of reports would say no more than 15, maybe 20 words a sentence. So, if you've got a big long idea, try to break it up a little bit. That also helps you use active verbs, also helps you keep short sentences. There's, I have an example. I'm going to pull out my example here. There's something I call, there's no real word for it, but I call it verb strings that tends to happen in bureaucraties that makes sentences very long and hard to make your way through. But they're really easy to avoid usually, because they're things like, I just looked these up actually, and the federal government writes this way, so just don't, sometimes your RFP is going to be written in a way that you absolutely do not want to write your grant. But there's lots of things that's like funds to support the development of, how about just funds to develop? Intentions to aid in the implementation of, how about just our intention is to implement? Organizations are planning to research. Our organization will research. Or the proposal must also demonstrate a plan to target. That was my favorite one that I found. You can just say the proposal must target. There's just a lot, and it's so common to write that way, and you shouldn't feel bad if you do, because we read it all the time. But just really think about making those active verbs and like figure out where you can shorten it down, because you just have suddenly made it so that somebody is going to understand it like that, kind of lightning quick, and it's going to stick in their mind. And then the people who are great writers can get to be really formal when they approach a grant in a way that they don't need to do. You don't have to be all chummy and funny and exclamation points, but you can show enthusiasm. You should be excited enough about this project that you show your enthusiasm, that you think it has a lot of potential, that it's going to fit your community well, that's going to be great, that it's going to bring different groups together, that it's going to change the culture of how you approach a certain issue. Go for it. But just in the middle of that enthusiasm, make sure to be specific. Make sure you're not saying, this is going to be awesome, everyone will love it. You just need to say, it's like, so-and-so has been trying to get a program started like this for many years. In partnership with this, we think this can make a huge difference in our community, and our community has expressed the desire for this kind of program, or something like that. So you're still being enthusiastic and showing that you really want it, but you're not making a lot of just, this is great. And there's a lot, and it's really tempting to just say, this is going to be an amazing program for our community, but that doesn't tell the grantors anything and waste your space, because sometimes you have very few pages to be able to tell this stuff in. And of course, minimal bureaucracy. So if it's really jargony and you really only use it inside your own line of work, or if they're acronyms that are just not going to be super, super clear. I mean, you can use acronyms and tell them what they are the very first time, but don't do that so that you have sentences that have 5 different acronyms in them. Choose the most important acronyms to use and the other things write out, because it's just impossible to make your way through. And you do not want to make this hard for people to read. And then it just really, and that's the benefit of having other readers too, is that they will call you on your jargon and just find other ways to say all of that, because it's just going to make it so much easier to understand, so much easier to remember. You don't totally know who's reviewing your grant, and you want to make sure it's really accessible to everyone. And in every piece you can possibly do this with, build your case with data. Use that as your storyteller. Your story should be told using data in pretty much all aspects of it. So there were some days, you know, it's been a long time now, but I've seen some grants that are kind of like, geez, we really need a parenting education program, and that would be so good for us, that managed to get funded. But I think those days are mostly gone. Just because it sounds like a really good idea is not going to get you funded.
I'd also add, make sure that you're following instructions. So they're going to be a number of different funders that have different instructions. Some may be very loose and say, well, we're looking for, just tell us your story and we'd love to hear from you, and let us know what you need and how you need it. And oftentimes those are new foundations that haven't really established themselves yet, and those can be good ones to approach because they aren't very well organized and they don't have a lot of real rigid standards in terms of their expectations. But you're also going to have a lot of funders who say there's a 15-page limit with 1-inch margins that you will use Helvetica 12-point font. All right. If you decide, I don't like Helvetica, I think Arial looks prettier, they will throw it in the garbage. And I've seen them do it. So follow the instructions. I remember once a group of people who received, I think they had like $450,000. It was through I think it was like a domestic violence related program. They had federal money and they were going to get another $100,000. All the different people who had applied for that money and received the first $500,000 were going to get the next $100,000. They said there was a 10-page limit on submitting the next money that they were eligible for. It was like everyone's going to get it. Okay, 10-page limit, 1-inch margins, times New Roman, 12-point font. Okay, they ended up having like 12 pages. Or God, there's no way we can condense this. We only can say it in 12 pages. So they changed the margins in order to make it fit 10 pages. And they changed instead of double space, it was like 1.5. And they threw it out. They said, you didn't follow the instructions on this, so you're not going to get the extra $100,000. And this was out of Hamilton. And they were mortified by the fact that they weren't going to get the extra. They said, if you can't follow our instructions, then I don't know that you're going to be able to use this money, spend this money wisely. So we're not going to fund you. So there are foundations, and certainly at the federal level, federal grants that are like, just follow their instructions exactly the way they have them stated, because there are some people that are incredibly anal, that are reviewers, that will go through all of that first before they even start to read it to make sure that you follow the instructions.
Yeah, and there's a lot that are in the middle too that they won't be quite that prescriptive, but they will also, like for each section, they'll say this section must address, and they'll have a list of 7 things. And you better not miss one, because if you miss one, you're done. And that's when your proofreaders can help you out too.